Welcome to Everything You Need to Know About the Ascension of Humanity, the podcast where ancient wisdom meets modern science and spiritual evolution gets real. I'm Heather, an energy healer, channel, and spiritual coach with Divine Ascension Company. Each week, we're diving deep into the mysteries of human consciousness, spiritual awakening, and the profound transformation happening within us and around us. But here's the thing. We're not doing this with our heads in the clouds. We're bringing neuroscience, psychology, quantum physics, and cutting-edge research to the table alongside meditation, energy work, and timeless spiritual teachings. Because the truth is, the ascension of humanity isn't some far-off cosmic event. It's happening right now in the choices we make, the awareness we cultivate, and the healing we do within ourselves. Whether you're curious about how mindfulness literally rewires your brain, why shadow work is backed by depth psychology, or what coherence between your heart and mind actually means scientifically, you're in the right place. We'll explore practices like breathwork, meditation, and emotional alchemy, not as abstract concepts, but as tangible tools grounded in both spiritual wisdom and scientific understanding. And here's where it gets even better. In our bonus episodes, you'll hear from real people sharing real stories. These are the warriors, the healers, the everyday seekers who've walked through their own darkness and found their light. They'll share their breakthroughs, their struggles, and the resources that actually help them along the way. Because personal growth isn't a solo journey, and you deserve to know you're not alone. So whether you're just beginning to question the nature of reality, or you're deep in your spiritual practice, this podcast is your companion on the path. It's time to expand, to awaken, and to rise together. Let's begin. Today's guest is one of those people who makes you think the system was always going to be too small for her. Dr. Tamar is a licensed clinical psychologist with a doctorate she earned during COVID while homeschooling 3 kids, working via telehealth, and quietly waking up to the fact that a lot of what she'd been taught didn't tell the whole story. She was raised secular, found her way into Orthodox Judaism in her 20s, not through family pressure, but through a genuine search for truth, and has spent the decades since learning that the soul doesn't fit neatly into any one framework, religious or clinical. She holds that tension with remarkable honesty. Her approach to therapy is integrative in the truest sense. CBT, ACT, DBT, mindfulness. But she doesn't hand people a protocol and tell them to follow it. She gets to know the person. She finds what resonates. She teaches it as a skill and lets them decide. Because she believes, as a clinical psychologist who has also walked a deep spiritual path, that a psychologist is treating the soul, and you cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach to the soul. In this episode, we talk about the difference between religion and spirituality and why they don't have to be in conflict. We talk about the awakening, what she noticed, when she noticed it, and what it's like to be ahead of the curve before the rest of the world catches up. We talk about the DSM, why the expanding list of diagnoses are troubling, and why we believe many people labeled with mental illness may actually be experiencing unmanaged spiritual gifts. We talk about past lives, reincarnation, and what Western psychology is still learning to account for. And she closes with a piece of advice that made me want to start the episode over from the beginning. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. I am really excited about my guest today. She is a clinical psychologist and she is gone through her spiritual awakening. She has become an Orthodox Jew, which is awesome, and also really understands the dynamic about the Great Awakening that we're going through, the ascension and frequency and all the things. So I'm really excited to talk to you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Tamar Strambrand. Doctor just happens to be my degree, not me and who I am. I'm in my upper 40s, and I'm going to leave it at that. I live in Rockland County, New York. There's a very robust and very diverse Orthodox Jewish community here. Yes, I am. I have my doctorate in clinical psychology, which I earned at the age of 40 during COVID.
Oh, good job.
Yeah, I actually did it during COVID. I had 3 children, and I still have, thank God, an incredible support system with my parents and my in-laws and my husband and friends. We are all connected. We're not alone in this world, and none of our accomplishments are our own. They're because of other people that are behind us and support us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So right now, what I'm doing right now is it's pretty complicated. I was doing the 9 to 5 thing, and I had been doing the 9 to 5 thing at different kinds of 9 to 5 jobs over the last 25 plus years of my working career. I was working in a psychiatric hospital in my area. It's called Rockland Psychiatric Hospital. It's a state hospital. I really loved it. I loved the patients. The patients weren't the issue. The staff was. Some of the staff, not all the staff, the people on my particular unit that I worked on were wonderful, but administration, certain people in administration just it wasn't working for me. So my husband encouraged me to just grow in practice. So I did with his encouragement. And I left that job as April 30th of last year. It's hard to believe it's been almost a year. The year really went by, but I feel like time is flying by more quickly. Mm-hmm. It doesn't even feel like time anymore. Time feels like something different than what I ever knew what it was. Mm-hmm. And it's been interesting. I started off just doing psychotherapy, and I thought that that's all I was going to do. It turns out I don't really like psychotherapy that much for a bunch of reasons. It's a discovery journey. And then now I've started getting into diagnostic testing. I do psychoeducational IQ testing for kids who are struggling in school and need, the teachers need help finding placement for them. I do autism diagnostic testing.
Okay.
I literally just last week launched my website. I'm really excited because I've been working on that for a long time.
Yeah. I
have a website now, which I'll give you the information later. And I also am now working on starting my own social media content page. It's right now I'm sticking with Facebook. Yeah. Eventually from Facebook, it will spill over into maybe something like Instagram. Yeah. So it's an interesting time you're catching me in my life journey for this particular talk that we're having.
Yeah, no worries. I get it. I went through all of that when I started my own practice. So I totally understand. It is a journey. It really is. And you just kind of learn and grow as you go, right?
That's been my life journey.
Yeah. So So tell me a little bit about, so you have I'm assuming that your family is Jewish and that you've had that kind of background your whole life, at least that exposure. So how did you get, because a lot of people I find tend to do, at least up until this point, have kind of geared more towards religion versus spirituality. So how did you kind of get to the point where you blended both of those together?
Okay, it's a long story. I was born into a Jewish family, but we were not religious at all. Like we were there, maybe somewhat traditional, if that. My mom's side, they were my grandparents were Holocaust survivors from Poland, and they talked about their experiences, but not so much. And my father's side, my father's Sephardic, and his parents were from Turkey, and they lived in Istanbul, and they couldn't deal with the fact, first of all, they were peasants. They barely had enough, they were eating living hand to mouth, and they also didn't really have safety, so they decided to make Aliyah to Israel in the 1950s. And it's a whole story of how my mother met my father, a whole story that can only be a divine hand, but I'll get into it at a different time if you want. So I was raised secular. I was raised to, I went to public school. I didn't know that much about Judaism, but enough. Like I was a typical, bagels and lox and cream cheese kind of Jew.
Okay.
And then I went to college. I went to Binghamton University, and I started meeting modern Orthodox people over there from like Teaneck and Bergenfield, and I still ascribe to quote unquote modern Orthodox, whatever that means. Your religious observance, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same thing. I do affiliate as being observant of the Torah, but my understanding of what Torah observance is has shifted dramatically over the last 20 years.
Okay.
So I met some of these Jews, and I had never kept kosher before, and there was a kosher kitchen, so I joined, and it was like a social thing for me. It wasn't really a spiritual thing for me. The spiritual journey really started after college. I started working as a home-based OT. I was an occupational therapist at that time, so I did home-based pediatric therapy, and I started getting a lot of jobs in the homes of Orthodox people, and I hadn't had much contact with Orthodox people. And they were of varying degrees. Some were modern Orthodox, some were, very, very much, I don't know if you want to call it right wing. Some were modern Orthodox, covered their hair, wore skirts, kept Shabbat, but like the women were allowed to go to college. Some were, wore pants, t-shirts, didn't cover their hair, and were keeping Shabbat and a lot of the Torah stuff. It was a whole. I started asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it resonated with me. Something inside resonated with me because I was searching. I was a young adult. I had never really had a boyfriend. I was very shy, and I had been teased and bullied by kids my entire career in the public school system that I had grown up in. And I was very disillusioned and depressed, a mid-20s psychological mess, if you want to call it.
I think we all were at that point, but yeah.
I was a mess. I was a mess. Yeah. Not now. Not now. Now, thank God, no.
That's good.
So I started asking questions, and then I don't know. It's a long story that would take too long to share on here. But let's just say one thing led to another. I ended up going to a retreat for women, young women in their mid-20s who were interested in learning more about Torah Judaism. And we were allowed to ask any questions we wanted. Here we were, a bunch of us in this place called Moodus, Connecticut, middle of nowhere, bungalow colony kind of thing. We had this rabbi with a long black coat, and a black hat and a long beard. And he himself, by the way, was a returnee as well, who he had become religious much earlier on. And we were allowed to ask him anything we wanted. And boy, did we ask him questions. And boy, did we not keep it quiet. I opened my mouth and found a voice for the first time. Well, why is this like this? And why is this like that? And everything he answered, if he didn't know, he said, I don't know all the answers. That I don't really know. But for sure, I'll try to find out from someone else. Or, you can, if you yourself know someone else, please feel free to ask. But he had answers that made sense when he was able to answer for everything. There was one question that somebody asked or something that someone said that stuck with me. And after that, I was like, wow, she's right. And she said that in the Torah, when God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, he gave it to them all at the same time at Mount Sinai. They were all there together, like, I don't know, 600,000 Jewish souls, they say, were there. And they all witnessed God's voice and the miracles of the mountain with the lightning and the thunder and whatever it was. I don't even know what it looked like at the same time. And she said, and also in throughout the Torah, Moses sometimes makes mistakes and admits to it. And she said, and I've looked into other religions, and I never ever heard in other religions where God revealed himself to an entire nation of people, just to one person, and then that one person spread those teachings. And also, I also never heard that the person who got the teaching, the revelation and the teachings, ever admitted that they were wrong about something.
Wow.
And it struck something in me, and I was like, this is true. This is really true. Judaism and Torah is more than just a religion. There's something different about it. And I happened to have been born into it. And what a shame I don't know anything about it. So maybe I should start learning. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a boyfriend. So I just did what a bunch of other women my age were doing. And I picked up, left to Israel, and went to study in a very famous seminary named Neve Yerushalayim in Israel. It's been around for a very, very long time for women like myself. And I found all the answers.
Wow, that's amazing. What was the most surprising thing that you discovered while you were there?
By the time I got to Neve Yerushalayim, I was already doing the skirts and the long sleeves in the summer, and I was keeping Shabbat. A lot of women weren't. Okay, but the one thing that I found was amazing was they let everybody ask questions. And boy, did some of these women ask questions, and they were nervy about it. And they were never, ever given an attitude, ever, ever. If the rabbi didn't know or the rebbitzin didn't know, they said, I don't know. If they did know, they answered, and they always gave sources. Okay, and the thing that they said was, do not take observance on all at once. No other religion does that. And I looked into other religions. No other religion does that. They said, you must start slow and do things one thing at a time and do it slowly. Otherwise, it's not going to stick.
Right.
And that made so much sense to me.
Yeah. It's just like building a habit. You don't want to, so many people like on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, they're like, I'm going to start X, Y, Z and F and D and G. And it's like, okay, well, just try one, because you have to really put that effort in there and understand what you're learning, before you can start implementing that and embodying that into your everyday life. Sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, even that has evolved since then. It's very, I don't see myself as a religious person. I don't believe in religion. I don't believe, if I stuck with the religious side of Judaism, I wouldn't be doing it now, because there's so much that I've learned from living in different communities that ticked me off or confused me or upset me or just downright disgusted me, but I did learn that people are people, and no matter what community you live in or how religious people are or aren't, they're human, and people are going to be amazing and disgusting. We're that's just how it is. And you have to think for yourself and use your discernment, your godly discernment that God gave you, and make choices about what you want to do with your life, how you want to live it, how you want to view things, how you want to cope based on what resonates with inside of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found that a lot of people who have that religious background, regardless of what religion it is, they do find things that they're like, this doesn't really make sense to me. And, or they get, like you said, ticked off and frustrated. So as you were going through this journey and learning about, Judaism, what was the biggest shift from how you felt about it in the beginning to how you feel about it now?
I think that the pinnacle of it started during COVID. COVID made everybody, I think everybody can say, even if they haven't made any changes, something in the world was different.
Yeah.
Different than ever before. Even the Holocaust, as horrible as it was, and I'm not putting it down, I'm not or putting it on pedestal or anything. The world wasn't ready for the shift yet. It wasn't ready, but it happened during COVID, and I was one of those people who I like to call woke up early.
Yeah, 100%. That was 2012 was a big year, but 2020 was a really big year too for the collective shift. Absolutely. So what did you notice? Was it just like, feeling in the air, the way people were acting? Like, what made you notice that shift? What made you wake up early?
It didn't happen right away during COVID. It basically, I was home a lot, and I had to homeschool all three of my kids, and I had to work also, and I was working via telehealth. I was overwhelmed. I was overweight. I was miserable. I being the person that I was, I just started to go online and just veg out online, which is what a lot of people do. I can't remember all the details, but it's a lot to tell if I would remember them. But I just ended up researching about life, about the vaccines, and I like Trump. I'm not getting political here, but he's a human being like everybody else, and I was very confused by the things that he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure. Do I get listen, I'm married to a doctor, and he's very, 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 I think he's starting to change because I'm making him change his mindset. But back then he was like, we got to get he didn't push me, but he said, we got to get the vaccines. It's very, very important. It saved people's lives in the hospital that I was working with. And I believe him when he said that. But then something also about the vaccine scared me.
Yes.
It was too quick.
Mm-hmm.
It was too quick.
Absolutely.
I am not going to go into the story of whether or not I got them or give them to my kids or anything like that, because that will cause a volcanic eruption in the audience. But what I will say is I did start talking to other people online on different forums and doing research. And eventually it led me to this small group of people that in the beginning, it was some of them were Orthodox people. And then it led me to a group of people that were mixed Orthodox, yes, Jewish, not Orthodox, and non-Jewish too. And we were all, quote unquote, what it's called, awake.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all asking the same questions, and we were all, researching and sharing each other's research and trying to like stick together and really give each other support, because whatever the topics were that we were researching and trying to warn people about, for example, the Epstein stuff, I can talk about it now. 4 years ago, I couldn't talk about it. This is not new to me. I researched and saw this stuff 4.5 years ago. And when I was trying to warn people about it, they said, stop. You're being a conspiracy theorist. You're just, you're. And now I look at people, I don't say a word. And they know right away. They were like, you were right. You know what I mean? So this little group and we've been ahead of the game for years, but it took me a couple of years to find them. Mm-hmm. And now that I have them, they're like, oh, my best friends, even though I've never gotten to meet them in person. One person in particular that I'm going to say her name because I love her very much, and she's eventually going to hear this, is Nancy Singletary, and she lives in St. Simon Island in Georgia. And what she is doing and giving of her time and her care to try to save this country is beyond.
Awesome. Well, you should tell her about the podcast. I'd love to have her on.
I will. I will. We're trying to get the word out about the project that she and a lot of other people are working on.
Well, give her my information. I would love to have her on. That would be great.
Sure.
That's kind of the whole point of this, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. So, and it's funny because the people, all of us who knew about all of this stuff for forever, like, oh, where's your tinfoil hat? Like, blah, blah, blah. It's interesting because I've never once said, I told you so. I've never once been like, hey, what do you think about this? It's like you're letting people figure it out on their own, which is important because you're right. Like you have to use your discernment. And I felt the same way when the COVID shots came out. I didn't want to get one. And my sister-in-law was like, if you want to see your nieces, you have to get one. So I did end up getting the first one, much to my dismay, but I never got any of the other ones. I refused. Even when I worked in the hospital, I was like, you can fire me. That's fine. I refuse to do it. I'm like, if there's not been enough research about it, and I don't trust, the things that are in it, because I say my master's degree is in applied behavior analysis, and I was planning on going to med school to be a child psychiatrist. That was my plan. Once I found out, going through these rabbit holes and found out about, where the medical school program came from, who it was benefiting, all the things that they missed and don't include in Western medicine that are so important, I was like, I think I'm going to take my own route instead. And once you kind of learn these things about the Epstein files, about all the people involved, about, the conspiracies that, really aren't conspiracies anymore, it really makes you change, your plans and stuff. So it's really interesting to hear from someone else who kind of was awake to these things prior, because now it's all starting to come out. And it baffles me how people are, and I don't know what that's going to look like when this episode airs, but at this point, it baffles me how so many people are seeing the evidence right in front of their face and are still in denial about it. It's crazy to me.
We have a lot of people to wake up. People, we all of us, you, myself as well, we were all, I guess, under a spell, if you want to call it.
Yeah,
we've all been under a spell, and we were raised in this one big lie, and basically what we're living through is a psychological operation. There is a physical side to the war that we're living in, but the war is more psychological than physical, because it's an awakening of the entire world, that our entire history that we've been fed is a lie. Everything's a lie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very hard to come to say, oh my God, you mean the education that all those years I put into school, that was all a lie? Yep. You mean everything about medicine and health that I learned, that was all a lie? Yep. I mean, everything, the food supply, that and healthy, what is healthy food and nourishing versus what is, not nourishing, that's also a lie? Yep. that you keep checking off the list and it's all a lie. And it's very hard for a person to be willing to say, I'm willing to learn something new. And even, yes, my religion is not a religion. It's a tradition. And I do believe in its truth, but I believe that there's layers and layers of rituals and ideas and requirements, if you want to call it, that are not part of what the original Torah observant life was supposed to be about. I go along with it on the outside because I have kids and I don't want to ruin their lives, you know what I mean, by being a conspiracy theorist. But deep down, I know that, eventually when all of this comes out and all of the lies are revealed, that whatever Torah observance was supposed to be versus what it's become is going to be revealed. And then all of these stringencies and all these other things that annoy me are going to go away. And then I'm going to be much happier.
Yeah, one can hope, yes. And I hope that that's the case for all of the religions, because I think over time, and this is one of the biggest issues that I had with organized religion, is that, you take these teachings and then you have these people in these institutions who are taking those teachings and interpreting them in a way that benefits them rather than what the original story was supposed to be, whether that's Christ, whether that's, the Torah, whether that's whatever it is that you might be practicing. And I'm looking forward to the day where all of us can sit down together and realize, and I've talked about this before, and realize that we're all kind of if you take away all of those things that have been added on, all the, like, you have to do this, you have to do that, and really look at the core teaching, you're going to realize that we're all kind of teaching the same thing, just using different language and using different, spiritual figures as their people. But it's really all the same thing, just a little bit different. And that's what makes it so unique and so diverse and so amazing. But we have to be able to work together and really appreciate the diversity between, all of the different thoughts and teachings.
And I also want to tie this into psychology, a few ideas on psychology. So when I went to the Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Conference in Nashville, Tennessee, we're going back like more than 12, 13 years. There was a speaker at the CBT conference, and the DSM-5 had just come out, just come out. This is a long time ago, obviously. So he said something that made me laugh, but it also is true. He said in the DSM-4, there were between 150 to 200, maybe a little bit more than 200 psychological diagnoses. And now that the DSM-5 came out, they rearranged it, they added things, they took things out, they combined things, they pulled things apart. And now there's over 300 something mental health diagnoses. And I just don't believe that God would have made that many mental health diagnoses.
Yeah.
And that was brave of him to say that, because he's a licensed psychologist and you know how politics are.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, especially in the medical field. Yeah, that's amazing that he would say that, but it's true. Like, and the one thing that I hate about the DSM-5 and the way that they reorganized it is that now, like, there's so many things that are very similar, and the way people look at it, they look at it as a checklist, like, okay, and it's black and white, and it's like, well, what are the circumstances around why they're doing this? And I've talked about this before as well, like, as far as like schizophrenia and things like that, like, I think these are people who have spiritual gifts that are unmanaged, uncontrolled, and they don't know what's happening. And I think that they're given all these medications which are just really making things worse, and thrown away, locked away, and the keys thrown out, and they're just shoved aside instead of actually really looking at the spiritual and energetic aspect of it, where you could really approach it from a very different standpoint and probably have a lot better results.
Yeah. Now, a lot of psychology, as far as the modalities that I've learned, a lot of it is very helpful. I am not I know there's some psychologists, I'm a CBT therapist, I'm an ACT clinician, I only do DBT. I'm not like that. My approach is I take the skills that I think are the best from each of the modalities. I study the modalities very, very deeply. And then when I'm talking to a person, I'll say to them, oh, you know what? There's the skill from DBT that I learned. Let me show it to you. I wonder if it resonates with you. Tell me if it resonates with you. I teach it to them. What do you think? And they can decide for themselves whether or not it's something that will help them. If it's something that will help them, I'll give them worksheets, or I'll give them, videos that I've seen online or something. And that seems to work really, really well, as opposed to trying to put everybody into this cookie cutter. Okay, you're going to benefit from CBT for your diagnosis of, and if you do this on Monday and this on Tuesday and this on Wednesday, you're going to be cured.
Right. Exactly.
Which to me is baloney.
Sure. And that's the thing, like, even with spiritual healers and stuff, like, they're like, oh, you can go get these certificates, you can go learn this modality, that modality. And there's so many, just like in medicine, there's so many different methods and techniques and practices. But again, using your discernment, like, okay, well, one thing might not be, it might not resonate with this person, and there might be more than one thing going on. So maybe they might benefit from more than one modality. So really learning to adapt to the client and meeting them where they're at, whether that's in psychology or spirituality, you really have to get to know what is going on with that person and figure out what's best for them, not what you were told would be best for XYZ circumstance. And I think that's so important. Yeah.
See, an MD or a DO, they're treating the body. They're treating the physical body. So yes, there's certain protocols and with medications and different treatments that has to follow a certain method, if you want to call it. But a psychologist is treating the soul.
Yes.
There's no protocol for treating the soul, because we're talking about past life reincarnations that are unconsciously being intertwined with this life's situation. And you just can't use, one size fits all to treat that.
Absolutely. And I do want to say that I'm not knocking Western medicine or medication or doctors. They are doing a great job and they do help, but it's just not the full picture. You have to look at everything else.
Yes. I think you and I resonate on the same wavelength on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was an absolute pleasure to talk with you. You said your website was ready. Do you want to share it with everyone? I'll make sure it gets in the description too.
Sure. And I'll eventually send it to you. It's T like Tom, E like Eva, S like Sam, therapy, therapy.com.
Awesome. I'm so proud of you for getting that up and ready. And I look forward to being friends on social media. We can help promote each other for sure. So awesome. Thank you so much for being on. One last thing before we go, if there's one piece of advice that you could give to the listeners, to anyone out there, what would it be?
Become your authentic self. Listen to your authentic self, and don't let anybody tell you that what your authentic self is trying to tell you is not your truth. Live in your truth. You only have one life.
That's amazing. I 100% agree. I couldn't have said it better. Awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
If you're ready to stop surviving the ascension and start actually moving through it with a map, the Self-Spirit method was built for exactly where you are. And if you want a little taste of what that might look like, my book, Becoming Divine, is now available. It's the foundation, the framework, and the permission slip all in one place. Find the program and the link to purchase the book at divineascensionco.com. You were never meant to figure this out alone. I'm here. Let's do this together.